The massive cargo bay doors of Gateway Station hissed open as another transport ship docked. Among the crowd of alien passengers stepping onto the metal walkways, a small figure moved slowly, clutching a worn bag against her chest. Nera looked nothing like the other species bustling around her. Her skin had a soft blue tint that seemed to shift colors when she felt scared or sad, and right now it was getting darker by the minute. She was only 12 years old, though age meant different things for her people, the Villani. What mattered more was that she was completely alone in a universe that didn't seem to want her kind around. The Villani were known throughout the galaxy as the crying ones, the weak ones, the species that felt too much. Other aliens looked down on them, thinking their emotions made them unreliable and soft. Nera found a quiet corner in the station's main eating area and sat down on the cold floor. Her stomach rumbled, but she only had enough credits for maybe one small meal. She pulled out a piece of stale bread from her bag and took a tiny bite, trying to make it last. The bustling sounds of dozens of different alien species filled the air around her. She could hear the clicking language of the spider-like Thek traders, the deep rumbling voices of the rock-skinned granite people, and the high-pitched whistles of the bird-like skyfolk. All of them seemed to have somewhere to go, someone waiting for them, some purpose. Nera had none of that. Her family was gone, lost in the war that had torn through the outer planets. The refugee center on Station 12 had promised her safe transport to a Villani colony, but her papers kept getting delayed. No one would tell her why, but she could feel their disgust when they looked at her. That was another thing about her people that others hated. They could sense emotions, even across different species. Right now, Nera could feel waves of annoyance and dismissal from every alien that glanced her way. A group of young Thek children noticed her sitting alone. They started pointing and making those clicking sounds that passed for laughter among their kind. One of them said something in their language that made the others laugh harder. Nera didn't need to understand the words to know they were making fun of her. The first piece of food hit her shoulder. It was some kind of purple fruit, overripe and sticky. She looked up with wide eyes, hoping it was an accident, but the Thek children were grinning with all four of their mouths. Their parents stood nearby, watching with approval. In their culture, showing weakness invited punishment. It was supposed to teach strength. More food started flying. Chunks of bread, bits of meat, sticky fruits. Other alien families gathered around to watch, some laughing, others just staring with cold interest. A few of the adults even encouraged their own children to join in. The message was clear: this is what happens to the weak ones. This is what you get for being different. Nera tried to shield herself with her arms, but the food kept coming. Her blue skin was turning darker and darker as her distress grew. Tears started flowing down her cheeks, which only made the crowd laugh harder. Crying proved their point. It showed everyone that the Villani really were as weak as everyone said. She pressed herself deeper into the corner, trying to disappear. The metal wall felt cold against her back as she curled up into a small ball. More laughter echoed around her. More food splattered against the wall above her head. She could feel the emotions of everyone watching. Amusement. Superiority. Disgust. Not one spark of sympathy or kindness. This was her life now. This was what being the last of her family meant. Sitting alone in corners while strangers used her for entertainment. The refugee center had told her to be patient, that her papers would come through eventually. But maybe this was all she deserved. Maybe the other aliens were right about her people being too weak to matter. The food court grew louder as more species joined the crowd. Some were taking pictures with their strange alien devices. Others were calling their friends over to watch. Nera had become the day's entertainment, a living example of everything that was wrong with the emotional species of the galaxy. She closed her eyes and wished she could just fade away completely. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear new footsteps approaching, but she didn't look up. Probably just another alien coming to join the fun. After all, who would possibly want to help someone like her? The footsteps stopped right in front of Nera, but instead of more laughter or cruel words, she heard the soft thud of someone sitting down. She kept her eyes squeezed shut, expecting another piece of food to hit her at any moment. But nothing came. The crowd's laughter began to fade into confused murmurs. Slowly, Nera opened one eye and saw a pair of worn work boots next to her. She looked up and found herself staring at something she'd never seen before. The being sitting beside her had smooth, pale skin and short dark hair. His clothes were simple, the kind worn by station workers. But what caught her attention were his eyes. They were brown and warm, and when he looked at her, she didn't feel the usual waves of disgust or superiority that came from other species. "Hey there," the stranger said quietly. His voice was gentle, nothing like the harsh clicking of the Thek or the booming tones of the granite people. "Rough day?" The Thek children had stopped throwing food entirely. They stood frozen, their forearms hanging at their sides, staring at this new creature who had dared to sit with the outcast. Their parents were whispering among themselves in rapid clicks, clearly confused by what they were seeing. "I'm Tony," the stranger continued, pulling out a wrapped sandwich from a small bag. "Haven't seen you around here before. You waiting for someone?" Nira's blue skin began to shift back to its normal lighter shade as her fear subsided. She could sense something different about this being's emotions. There was no mockery, no cruelty, just genuine curiosity and something else she hadn't felt from anyone in months. Kindness. I'm Nira," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the background noise of the station. "I'm waiting for transport papers." Tony nodded as if this was perfectly normal conversation. He unwrapped his sandwich and tore it in half, offering one piece to her. These station bureaucrats can be real slow with paperwork. "You hungry?" The crowd around them was growing more confused by the minute. A few of the alien parents started pulling their children away, clearly unsure about this strange new species that showed kindness to outcasts. The Thek family who had started the food throwing gathered their belongings and left entirely, muttering in their clicking language. Nira stared at the offered food. It smelled better than anything she'd eaten in days, but she hesitated. "Why are you being nice to me? Everyone else thinks my people are weak." Tony took a bite of his half of the sandwich and shrugged. "Where I come from, we judge people by their actions, not their emotions. Besides, crying doesn't make someone weak. It makes them human." He paused, then chuckled. "Well, not human in your case, but you know what I mean." "What are you?" Nira asked, accepting the sandwich with trembling hands. She'd never encountered this species before. They weren't in any of the galactic databases she'd studied. "Human," Tony said simply. "We're pretty new to this whole galactic community thing. Only been out here about 50 years. Still figuring out how everything works." As Nira ate, she found herself relaxing for the first time in weeks. Tony didn't stare at her changing skin color or make comments about her tears. He just sat there, eating his lunch like it was the most natural thing in the world to share a meal with an alien refugee. "Your people," she said carefully, "they don't think emotions are weakness." Tony laughed, and it was a warm sound that made Nira's skin glow with a faint, happy golden tint. "Are you kidding? We're probably the most emotional species in the galaxy. We cry at movies, we yell at sports games, we throw parties when we're happy and eat ice cream when we're sad. If emotions made you weak, humans would have gone extinct a long time ago." Around them, the other aliens were keeping their distance now, but Nira could feel their emotions shifting from amusement to curiosity. This human had done something none of them had ever seen. He'd chosen to sit with the outcast instead of joining the crowd. "Don't let them get to you," Tony said, finishing his sandwich. "I've been working stations like this for 5 years now, and I've learned something important. The species that pick on others are usually the ones who are most afraid of being different themselves." Nira wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. For the first time since arriving at Gateway Station, the tears weren't from sadness. "Thank you," she whispered. Tony smiled and stood up, brushing crumbs off his work clothes. "I take lunch here every day at this time. Same corner, same terrible station food. You're welcome to join me tomorrow if you want." As he walked away, Nira sat there in amazement. In a galaxy full of species who saw her as worthless, she'd found one who saw her as simply another person deserving of basic kindness. The next day, Nira arrived at the corner early, clutching her small bag nervously. She wasn't sure if Tony had really meant what he said about lunch, or if it was just something humans said to be polite. But as the station's artificial sun reached midday brightness, she heard those familiar footsteps approaching. Tony appeared with his lunch bag and that same warm smile. "Hey, Nira. How'd you sleep?" She felt a wave of relief wash over her. He had actually come back. "The shelter beds are hard, but better than the floor," she said honestly. As they shared another meal, Tony began telling her about his home planet, Earth. He described vast oceans and green forests, cities that sparkled with lights, and people who came in all different colors and spoke hundreds of languages. But what fascinated Nira most was how he talked about emotions. "On Earth, we have this thing called crying at weddings," Tony explained, unwrapping a piece of fruit. "Happy tears, we call them. People get so overwhelmed with joy that they cry. No one thinks it's weird." Nira's skin shifted to a lighter, more curious blue. "But the other aliens here say emotions make you unpredictable. Dangerous." "Maybe that's their problem," Tony said thoughtfully. "Back home, we learned that trying to hide what you feel usually makes things worse. Better to acknowledge it and deal with it. Over the following days, more humans began joining their lunch sessions. There was Kelly, a communications officer with bright red hair who always had funny stories about the strange messages she received from different alien species. Danny worked in security and had gentle hands despite his large size. Lisa ran the medical bay and spoke softly but carried herself with quiet confidence. Each of them treated Neera like she belonged there, like her presence was normal and welcome. They asked about her home planet, her family, her dreams for the future. No one had asked her about her dreams in years. "I used to want to be a mediator," Neera admitted one day as they sat in their usual circle. Before the war, Villani was sometimes called in to help resolve conflicts between other species. We could sense when people were lying or hiding their true feelings. Lisa leaned forward with interest. "That sounds incredibly useful. What happened to that?" Neera's skin darkened slightly. "After the war, everyone decided we were too emotional to be trusted with important work. They said we'd break down crying in the middle of negotiations." Danny shook his head in disgust. "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Some of the best negotiators I know back on Earth are the ones who understand feelings the best." "You really think so?" Neera asked, and for a moment her skin flickered with that golden glow again. "Absolutely," Kelly said firmly. "I deal with communications between dozens of species every day. Half the problems we have come from people not understanding what others are really trying to say. Someone who could sense the emotions behind the words? That would be amazing." As the days passed, something interesting began happening in the food court. Other aliens started watching their little group with curiosity instead of contempt. A few younger aliens from different species began sitting at nearby tables, close enough to overhear their conversations but not quite brave enough to join in. Neera noticed that her ability to sense emotions was actually getting stronger around the humans. Where other species felt like closed books, radiating only surface feelings, the humans were completely open. She could feel Tony's genuine kindness, Kelly's playful humor, Danny's protective instincts, and Lisa's caring nature. It was like being around her own people again. One afternoon, she decided to share something she'd been keeping secret. "I can tell when people are lying," she said quietly. "Not just hiding feelings, but actually lying. The emotions don't match the words." The humans exchanged glances, and Neera felt a spike of worry. Had she said too much? "That's incredible," Lisa said finally. "Do you know how valuable that skill could be?" "The station administrator has been lying to you about your papers," Neera continued, feeling brave. "Every time you ask about them, I can sense his frustration and guilt. He's not even trying to process them." Tony's expression hardened. "I had a feeling something was off about that guy. Always seemed too eager to get you out of his office." "What do you think he's really doing?" Danny asked. Neera concentrated, remembering the administrator's emotional signature. "He's hoping I'll just give up and leave. Or that someone else will take me away so he doesn't have to deal with the paperwork." The humans were quiet for a moment, but Neera could feel their emotions clearly. Anger on her behalf. Determination to help. And something else, something she'd never felt from any other species. Protectiveness. They were actually angry that someone was treating her unfairly. "Well," Kelly said with a grin that didn't match the steel in her voice, "I think it's time we had a little chat with Administrator Corvin." 3 days after the humans promised to help with her papers, everything on Gateway Station went completely wrong. It started with shouting echoing through the corridors in the early morning hours. Neera woke up in her shelter bed to the sound of angry voices and heavy footsteps running past her door. When she made her way to the food court for her usual meeting with Tony and the others, she found chaos instead of the normal busy morning routine. 2 groups of aliens were facing each other across the main plaza, their voices rising in heated argument. On one side stood the Thek traders, their spider-like bodies clicking and chattering in agitation. On the other side were the massive granite people, their rock-like skin glowing with angry red veins. The argument was about a cargo shipment that had gone missing somewhere between the Outer Rim and Gateway Station. Each side blamed the other for theft, and their accusations were getting louder and more threatening by the minute. Station security, mostly made up of various alien species, stood around the edges looking nervous but doing nothing to intervene. Neera pressed herself against a wall, trying to stay out of the way. She could feel the emotions radiating from both groups like heat from a fire. The Thek weren't just angry about the lost cargo, they were terrified. She could sense their fear of financial ruin, of losing face with their home colonies. The granite people were equally scared, but their fear came out as rage. They were afraid of being seen as weak, of other species thinking they could be pushed around. "Where are the mediators?" someone in the crowd shouted. "The Centauri mediators are dealing with the crisis in the Beta sector," came the reply from a station official. "The Andromedan peacekeepers are 3 days away." The situation was getting worse by the minute. More aliens from both species were arriving, some of them armed. Nera could feel the fear spreading through the crowd of bystanders like a virus. Everyone knew that if this turned into a real fight, the station's delicate peace would shatter. That's when she spotted Tony pushing through the crowd, still wearing his work uniform from the night shift. Behind him came Kelly, Danny, and Lisa, all looking worried but determined. They found Nera pressed against her wall and quickly surrounded her in a protective circle. "What's going on?" Tony asked, having to raise his voice over the shouting. "Lost cargo shipment," Nera explained, her skin flickering between blue and dark purple with stress. "Both sides think the other stole it. But Tony, I can feel what's really happening here." "What do you mean?" Lisa asked, crouching down to Nera's level. "They're not really angry about the cargo," Nera said urgently. "The Thek are scared because they borrowed money to buy that shipment. If it's really gone, they'll lose everything. The Granite people are afraid because they've had 3 shipments attacked by pirates this month. They think someone is targeting them specifically." Kelly's eyes widened. "So they are both scared, but they're showing it as anger?" "Exactly. And neither side is listening to what the other is really saying." Just then, a young Thek threw something at the Granite group. It looked like a piece of machinery, probably something from his trader's kit. One of the Granite people roared in response and took a threatening step forward. The crowd gasped and started backing away. "This is about to turn into a riot," Danny said grimly. "Where are the station's regular mediators?" Tony demanded. A nearby alien official, some kind of bird-like creature with nervous feathers, overheard him. "The professional mediators can't handle this," she chirped anxiously. "The emotional complexity is too great. We need someone who understands both species, but no one wants to step between them." Nera felt a strange sensation, like something clicking into place in her mind. She looked up at the humans surrounding her, these people who had shown her more kindness in 2 weeks than she'd experienced in months. "I could do it," she said quietly. The bird official's feathers ruffled with what looked like laughter. "Child, this is a matter for trained professionals with years of experience." But Tony was looking at Nera with those warm brown eyes, and she could feel his emotions clearly. He wasn't laughing. He was considering it seriously. "You can really sense what they are feeling?" he asked. Nera nodded. "I can feel their fear, their real motivations. I know what they need to hear." "But you're just a kid," Lisa said gently. "And no offense, but you're also the species they've been calling weak." "Maybe that's exactly why it might work," Kelly said thoughtfully. "Sometimes the person no one expects can get through when others can't." Another shout erupted from the crowd as tensions escalated further. Time was running out. Tony looked at Nera for a long moment, then at the chaos unfolding in front of them. The Thek and Granite groups were getting closer to each other, their voices rising to dangerous levels. Station security was backing away, clearly out of their depth. Someone had to do something, and fast. "Okay," Tony said firmly. "Let's try it." The bird official's feathers practically exploded with shock. "You cannot be serious. A child? A Villani child? This could start a war between 3 different sectors." But Danny was already moving, his security training kicking in. "Kelly, can you get us access to the station's announcement system?" "Already on it," Kelly said, pulling out her communication device. "Lisa, we'll need you to monitor Nera's stress levels. Make sure she doesn't get overwhelmed." "What about me?" Tony asked. Nera looked up at him, her skin shifting to a determined silver color that none of the humans had seen before. "Stay close to me. I'll need someone I trust nearby." They pushed through the crowd toward the center of the plaza. As they got closer, Nera could feel the emotions even more strongly. The fear was overwhelming, but underneath it she sensed something else. Both groups were exhausted. They'd been fighting and worrying for hours, and part of them just wanted it to be over. Kelly's voice suddenly echoed through the station's speakers. "Attention all species in the main plaza. We have a mediator ready to help resolve this dispute. Please step back and give her space to work." The announcement caused a moment of confused silence. Then the laughter started. A Thek trader clicked something that clearly meant her, while pointing at Nera. A Granite elder rumbled with what sounded like amusement at the idea of a small alien child solving their problems. But Tony stepped forward, his voice carrying clearly in the temporary quiet. Her name is Nera, and she's got a skill none of your regular mediators have. She can sense exactly what you're really feeling, not just what you're saying. Humans, one of the granite people growled dismissively. You understand nothing of galactic politics. Maybe not, Tony admitted. But we understand people. And right now, you're all acting like scared people, not rational traders. The insult caused another uproar, but Nera stepped into the space between the two groups. Her small size meant she had to raise her voice to be heard, but her words cut through the noise. You're not angry about the cargo, she called out, her skin glowing with that same silver determination. Kethvar of the Granite Clan, you're terrified because this is the third attack on your ships this month. You think someone is specifically targeting your people, and you're afraid your family's trading license will be revoked if you can't protect your shipments. The massive granite leader stopped mid-roar, staring down at her in shock. How could she possibly know about his family's license issues? Nera turned to the Thek group. And Zixtal of the Thek Consortium, you borrowed against your colony's food reserves to buy this shipment. If it's really gone, your people will face hunger season with no backup supplies. You're not angry about theft, you're terrified of going home empty-handed. The Thek trader's forearms went limp at his sides. The specific fear she'd named was something he'd told no one, not even his own crew. How could you possibly know these things? Kethvar demanded. Because I can feel what you feel, Nera said simply. It's what my people do. And right now, I can feel that both of your groups are scared of the same thing. Which is? Zixtal asked, his clicking voice much quieter now. Pirates, Nera said. You're both afraid that organized raiders are targeting this shipping route. Kethvar, you suspect they're selling information about your cargo manifests. Zixtal, you think they have someone inside the station's traffic control. The two leaders looked at each other with dawning realization. Their enemy wasn't each other. It was whoever was feeding information to the raiders. The question is, Nera continued, do you want to keep fighting each other while the real thieves laugh at you, or do you want to work together to stop them? What happened next surprised everyone, including Nera. The two groups didn't just stop fighting, they started planning. Within an hour, they'd combined their security forces and shipping schedules. By the end of the day, they'd identified 3 suspicious individuals in traffic control who'd been passing cargo information to raider groups. As the plaza cleared and normal station life resumed, Nera found herself surrounded by officials from half a dozen different species. They were all talking at once, offering her positions, asking about her abilities, treating her like she mattered. But the moment that meant the most came when Tony put his hand on her shoulder. So, he said with a grin, still think emotions make you weak? Nera's skin glowed with pure golden happiness. I think I'm starting to understand what humans mean about strength coming in different forms. The station's food court looked different now. Where once there had been rigid separation between species, now there were mixed tables everywhere. And in one corner, a young Villani sat with her human friends, planning her first day as Gateway Station's new cultural mediator. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest acts of kindness.